Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the MindTalks podcast. This is episode 8, here with my man, Ryan James, Art and Digital, the man behind all the success and the future success, here to talk about his story today, here in this brand new, beautiful studio that's all done by him. He runs it, he owns it. Gonna have to check it out if you're in downtown Lake Geneva. So let's get started.
Thanks for coming by, man.
Oh, thank you for having me. We got a lot of things. We got a lot of things coming, man. I'm excited. So let's talk about your story, your background, and just where you started off.
That's a long one there. Where to begin?
You got time.
Well, first of all, this all comes from the belief in the possibility of things. That kind of emerged from a lot of positive influences in my life. So first and foremost, this begins with really people like my parents who kind of always instilled in me a intense belief in following through and believing in yourself and that things are possible. So immense amount of gratitude to them, mom and dad, for just being there for me and always letting me do some of the crazy dreams and failing at a lot of them, but kind of always having my back through that. But in terms of audio, if that's more of kind of to the question, I guess this started about 13 years ago. When I was, that's more than 13 years ago now. That'd be 16 years ago. Jeez, I'm getting old. I wrote down on my notebook that I wanted to open a studio called the Collaboration Laboratory, and in it, it's kind of vague. It wasn't like specific, but I had a idea of just opening a content creation studio. That term wasn't even coined back then, but a place that I could sit down and talk with like-minded individuals.
And for reference, how old are you now?
33. So
compared to when you wrote this down?
I was 17. So my math might be wrong on that, but long enough ago.
Yeah.
And what's cool is I still have that notebook, and I kind of came across it during this whole renovation process of this building, and I was like, wow, man, like sometimes it takes you 13 years to follow through on that initial dream, but following through is all that really matters in the end, because here we are, and it's kind of surreal because this is the first time the lights have been on, the cameras are on, and like I have a guest in here, vice versa. Like you're one of the very first people to be in here. So, and what's cool is when I first met you, that's probably one of the first things we talked about was this place, and I was probably just, dreaming out loud. But
yeah, no, we manifested it, and you talked it into existence. And from day one of you telling me, I believed in it so much because I've always loved content creation and YouTube. And, I grew up with social media. I'm 16 years old, so I was basically a part of the first generation of people to grow up with social media around. And hearing you talk about that and putting it into reality for me definitely just exceeded all things I could think about, because I've never been that type of like 9-to-5 job person.
Totally.
Never want to get stuck in that. I would do anything else than that. And being able to watch what you do and sort of apprentice you, and you take me on and show me your tricks of videography, photography, podcasting, everything. I'm super blessed and grateful to have you and show me it so I can pursue my dreams, help you pursue yours, and just be business partners along with friends and just go to the top. Collaboration
wins always.
Yeah.
I mean, how you learn is by being open to it, but also it's a transfer of enthusiasm, a transfer of information. There's anymore, this type of information is accessible to everyone. It takes a lot of discipline, I guess, to like teach yourself film production from like just YouTube, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And also too, like, the willingness to want to learn, you're here. There's a lot of people that might have had that opportunity as well, but you're the one showing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, don't talk about it, be about it. I think that's I can't remember who coined that one, but it's like, it's so true.
Yeah.
Show up and put in the work, and go figure, that works. But
yeah, for sure. Something you said yesterday you just brought it up now, and then you said it again yesterday, was you don't look at people as your competition. You look at them as collaboration. And that's something that you really brought to my life in terms of, I've always a super competitive person.
Sure.
And I saw people that did the same thing as me, as I have to be better than them, have to be better. And that doesn't discredit hard work and idolizing people and aspiring to be better than them. But you don't have to look at everybody as rivals. You
Sure.
can look at them as using each other, not using it in the sense of for bad things, but building off of each other to better succeed for you and the other person, mutual benefits.
Absolutely. I think all the greatest accomplishments of human beings are very careful collaborations. You know, you look at like the space program or anything, the building of a building. It's not just one guy. It's a team of generations. I mean, I look at it this way. If you reverse engineer everything that's in this room right now, we didn't make any of this. Yeah, sure, I assembled the table and put in the sweat equity to like buy the flooring and painted the walls, but we owe so much to the people that came before. Like, I didn't invent a paintbrush or like manufacture it. So these very things, you know, like these are all the result of collaborations. And without steering into that, I think healthy levels of competition is of course great. It's how you get innovation. And there's many, you know, obviously we're in combat sports and there's a level of competition. Of course you want to win, but you learn the most from losing.
Yeah.
And, you know, this type of pursuit is no different, that you got to screw up and you got to, not viewing people as competition, because there's other photographers and videographers and podcasters even in the area. I want to have them on as guests. Yeah. I want to film videos with them. I don't look at that as like, oh man, I got to alienate them or make them like, no, it's like, I want to meet them. I want to produce content with them.
I'm in the same spot mentally right now where it's like, I would rather learn from them and see what they do well and take from them, or see what maybe they've done that hasn't led them to the most success and try and cut that out. And the same thing, it's all just mutual and building off of each other. And I think that's like the key to successful business and successful relationships and friendships, is just, you need to make sure both sides are benefiting and you're helping each other and you have each other in their best interests. And I think that'll lead to way more success than if you were to talk bad upon another podcast in the area or another videographer, photographer, whatever it is, even competitor. If you're talking about combat sports or teams, like, I don't think that is the way to go. I think you'll be more successful with collaboration, just like you said.
No doubt. And I mean, there's so many examples. Literally, we could have endless episodes about just the examples of it. But I've noticed it to be absolutely true in my life and my experience, that when you steer into the collaborative effort and kind of make alliances with people in terms of, especially in, you know, the creative realm. I'm not a graphic designer, but I know great graphic designers. So it's like, when you want to take your brand to market, I know a guy who we can bring in on that. Yeah. I'm not a screen printer, but I know a screen printer. Mm-hmm. And so when you want to, you know, produce them at scale, it's just the network that you keep, the people that you bring into your orbit and kind of, you know, befriend along the way. You know, you don't have to know how to do everything. It's not a requirement. Yeah. And it's awesome to have specialized information, but it's good to be an amalgam of all those things and have, you know, multiple connections and multiple, kind of like you were saying, wanting to have multiple streams of income, but in this context, like multiple streams of creative outlet.
Yeah, there's like this idea of like, everybody knows someone who knows someone who knows someone. Like, building ties and building connections and building friendships is so important, because maybe I can't provide you with something that you need from me, but I know a guy who could provide that for you. And that's still me helping you in some way and you getting your work done, and then that guy getting paid or getting his work done.
Sure.
And I think connections in any business, any like stream of life is important, because friendships, business, everything, they all require help from all different areas.
Yeah. And, you know, kind of maintenance, because it's like, if it's one-sided, I mean, one-sided agreements never really work out. There has to be some kind of mutual benefit. Not always, but I mean, generally speaking, collaboration requires equal input.
Yeah. So it's more charity if it's not mutual.
Yeah. I mean, that's good too, but, you know, in this realm, collaboration requires a certain level of agreed input, output.
So when did you start sort of thinking about this? And I know you said when you were 17, you wrote this down, but more like the idea of creativity instead of like just manual labor and like just work, more getting into this side of things and freelancing, I guess you could say.
It was a slow process because innately or naturally, I'm not like the best businessman. Admittedly, you know, I think I believe in like radical transparency about stuff, because recently someone was like, you can't tell them you're a bad businessman. It's like, why? If it's true, just be like, I'm really good at the art side, but maybe not the invoicing side, which is fine. You can learn that later. It was a slow evolution, you know, because monetizing an art form or a maybe less conventional way of making a living. I did so many free gigs. I did so many gigs where I just lost money, where I like, there's a whole saga to this story, but I did a show once in Chicago. It was one of my biggest shows ever to this date, but I lost almost $1,000 just taking the gig because I bid it wrong. There were so many, I was 22. I just had never done something at that scale yet. So I underbid it, used all my vehicles, wasn't writing off the expenses, got a ton of, anyone who's driven on the Illinois tollway knows like that racks up. I ended up getting like a $500 bill just from the tollway for using my vehicles. Anyway, the long story short, it's a kind of a metamorphosis, because part of the motivation to do this is doing those other jobs that I didn't want to do. And, you know, knowing that ultimately when you're up on a ladder painting someone else's house, like this isn't the best use of my time. And no offense to people that are doing that, because I've been there too. But just knowing that, this is not, I'm not going to do this forever. And this money is going to create something that's going to be self-sustaining entity, like a business. But to answer your question more specifically, actually, what was your question? I kind of spaced on that.
No, I just wanted to dive into basically how your life started progressing into this idea of art.
Sure.
Sorry to cut you off, but you said how you've lived in different places and you've lived in Los Angeles, Oregon, all these different places, and I think it's cool because you gain experience, and nothing is more valuable than experience. There's nothing there's nothing that teaches you more than just experience and living, and you obviously have stories to tell and things you've learned, and I think we should dive into it, and I think you could offer a lot of different things that people will benefit.
Sure. Well, thank you, because it's been a long road, you know, like there's a lot of failures, a lot of like bad experiences along the way that I hope to help some people avoid, you know, because my mistakes, if I can help people bypass those. But on the creative side, there's always been some component or like intrigue as to photography. I remember I discovered my grandfather's camera that was just in our basement, and I had never met him. He died before I was born, but I remember thinking like, what a cool thing that was, that here in this box with film still and these flash bulbs and this like case that he had assembled together, this was like a time capsule, and hanging on the wall of our home where I grew up, you know, were pictures that he took. So even though I didn't get to meet him, I got to meet his art, and I got to see things from his perspective. And that just, even at a young age, I felt like that was a big deal. And I remember like blowing through the flash bulbs really quick, and this was in the 90s. So they still made flash bulbs, but they were really expensive. And I remember my parents just being like, chill on the flash bulbs, you know, like we can't be ordering these all the time. They make 35 millimeter cameras. And that's when disposable cameras kind of came into my life. And I wasn't really consciously like shooting and like composing images like, oh man, I'm going to take these awesome photos. But it was just the practice of like freezing time, being like, if I push the button with the flash, I get this look. And from a young age, I was just kind of really intrigued by the idea of freezing parts of time, that there's some magic in a camera, you know, an image, you know, they say it's
worth 1,000 words.
At least, you know, at least almost infinite, because, you know, think about these iconic images that still exist. Like they're talked about, and they bring about like raw emotion, and it's a powerful thing. So I was always very captivated by that. Now, in terms of turning that into a source of income, that didn't happen until almost just recently. Like it's been a grind, because freelancing is, you know, very, feast or famine.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, dude, I have a month where I'm like, I'm going to retire early. And then other months where I'm like,
I'm going to be on the street.
I lost
tomorrow.
money. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of walking that thin line, but also too, like getting back to the belief, someone out there is doing exactly what you want to do in life and doing it really well and making 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever, and living the exact life that you want to live.
Yeah, that you dream about.
They're doing it. So a friend and mentor of mine, I remember he told me that. His name's Nate Barger. What's up, Nate? Thanks for all the wisdom along the way. We lived in LA together. He was one of the first people I ever met. He was pretty far along in the LA recording school, and he just knew a lot. And he was from Midwest. He was from Indiana, so I connected with him immediately. We just had the same kind of like Midwest vibe, but nevertheless, he told me like, dude, you can never self-limit. You can never, like, someone is living the dream. You're already here. You moved to California. You're in the school. You're pursuing this right now. We're on movie sets of like big movies. Like we're living it. Yeah. Like I hate to break it to you, but you kind of made it here. So like, quit thinking that like you haven't accomplished something amazing. And sometimes you need that like reality check where people are like
that process of like enlightenment and awakening.
Yeah.
Because there's I was reading this book by Anthony DeMello. It's called Awareness. I recommend it more than anything. I've read it fully through twice. And there's this part in it where he says like, if you put a cat in a box from the time it's born and it grows up in that box, it'll never know it's in that box.
Sure.
Until it sees the outside world. When it sees the outside world, it's shocked. It doesn't even know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's not until you get outside that box where you really start to see growth and potential. And that ties into, there's no growth in the comfort zone. Like you have to come out of your comfort zone to grow. And I think that plays a huge role into all of it too.
Right. It's like muscles are built in the recovery, not during the workout. Yeah. You're breaking it. And so same is true creatively, like you got to mess up. You got to take big chances and kind of just, you learn from honestly the mistakes and like, well, it's like a cliche almost in the like photography world, but like developing from the negatives, like, cause from the film world, you develop negatives into the photos that they are. So like at first they look awful. Like if you look at a negative strip, you're like, how is that ever going to look good? But after the process of exposing it correctly, developing film, I've never done it personally, but yeah, developing from the negatives and like, as that pertains to life, yeah, the negative things in life often have the most profound impact because you figure out what doesn't work and what you don't want to do and what you never want to feel again, how to avoid that.
I said it in one of my previous podcasts in relations to jiu-jitsu. My first tournament, didn't lose a match. Next tournament, lost my first match, and it was like the best feeling. Like,
sure.
It was a breath of fresh air. It was a relief. And not saying like, oh, I was some big undefeated, like it was a local jiu-jitsu tournament. I was 14 years old.
Gordon Ryan losing his first match.
Yeah. But it's still just that the idea of losing, like I grew so much from that. And I also wasn't scared of losing anymore. Sure. I went in like, I can't lose. And I went towards life in that mindset of can't lose. You have to win. You have to be better. And once I finally took that loss and felt it, I was like, thank God, that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because not only does it give you that sense of reality and awareness to what could happen, but it makes winning so much better too.
Sure.
Everything just, not saying you want to strive to fail, because that's not it either.
Not.
You always want to strive to succeed, but failure isn't a bad thing. And I think it gets a bad connotation because it's not succeeding, but just because you don't succeed in quotations, meaning at whatever you're doing, doesn't mean it doesn't benefit you in some way.
It's progress.
Yeah.
And, part of that is the not fun. Another, I don't want to say it's a very on point example of that, but Edison tried 10,000 filaments before they arrived on tungsten for light bulbs.
Yeah.
So like that dude tried 10,000 things that didn't work to find one that did, and then some.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what it takes ultimately, is lots of failure, a few successes, but then until you get like a workflow down or whatever kind of system works, it's going to be there's going to be some grit, and that's part of the fun anyway.
Yeah. And I think what some people don't realize, that I feel like winners, people that always are winning, somebody who's undefeated at something or somebody who just, they seem to win, they almost don't have a sense of what winning even feels like when you're so used to it. Like if you lose at something and if you fail at something first, you fail a couple times, you fail once, however many times, but then you succeed at it, it gives you such a sense of accomplishment as opposed to if you win 10 fights in a row, that 11th fight, it's not going to feel so sweet when you win. It's just going to be, it's normal now. Whereas if you fail, like I said, don't strive to fail, strive to succeed. But still, like having that loss or having not accomplished what you set out to accomplish, it'll make that accomplishment feel so much better.
And to that point, like you said, you were liberated from the fear of losing after you did it. It was like, well, that wasn't so bad. Yeah. And you have a 10-fold benefit from that. Because imagine if you would have won that match. I mean, who knows? You could have gone on a few more months or something. You're further along in your progression having done so. And, you know, that applies to so many areas of life. It's literally the metaphor of life. It's like fail forward.
Yeah. I think that's definitely what it's about. It just, like I said, it opens up so many doors. You definitely see the most growth from failure, from even in like setting up the podcast. We had to try different camera angles, different mic settings, different everything.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Like we couldn't get the light plugged into the outlet, like stupid things. And it just, even small things like that, seeing what doesn't work makes what work so much better. Like
100%. And it's funny because I've envisioned this room for a year straight, where I'm going to put this, where I'm going to put that, completely different than the reality of it. Like when I was setting them up, I was like, oh yeah, they're a bit longer than I expected. And they just ended up where they are that's where they have to be kind of deal. And, you know, we're still ironing out the kinks here. It's not, you know, this is the first episode, so bear with us, you know, but, we'll get there. Yeah. I mean, no, talk about, now I know exactly how it needs to work. I'll get 4 of those and put them right there. And each person has their individual camera and they're non-intrusive, and it won't have to be this, you know, cumbersome setup.
And then from that, you will start to evolutionize. And that's another metaphor of life too, is it's like never make the same mistake twice. It's always improving and cycling onto newer and better. And it's like technology. Like it started with a flip phone and now it's gotten to be cameras and, you know, like crazy HD cameras that take better pictures than your eyes can even see, and talking cars and cars that drive yourself. Like if you went back 30 years ago and were like, hey, there's going to be this guy, his name is Elon Musk. He's going to make a Tesla. The Tesla, you can sit back in it and not drive the car.
Sure.
And not only that, it doesn't run on gasoline.
It sounds like sorcery magic.
Yeah.
You'd be laughed out of.
People would be like, dude, shut up.
And even recently with Elon, I mean, like, there's people that still doubt the guy, and it's like, have you not seen what the dude, I mean, I'm a huge Elon fanboy, so, you know, but it's just interesting too, though, that I think sometimes people don't know what to do with that level of accomplishment. It's like, how do you even fathom? They can't put themselves, one of my favorite sayings is people can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. So like they're judging you based on the depth that they know themselves. So if they're applying their own self limitations to you, like, oh, well, I can't do that, so therefore you can't do that. Well, I mean, when you're launching your own electric vehicle into space on your rocket, and the video of that alone was like, the choreography of it was just like a real special moment in human history. So say what you will about it, you know, one way or another, but there's a person that didn't allow other people's disbelief in his dreams to take over and take hold. I mean, dreams are killed by disbelief, and like it's so powerful, man. Like really, and I was very skeptical of like manifestation kind of things. Like I used to be way more cynical than I am now. And talk about evolution. It's like I was very cynical. I was very negative minded in that, like, I can tell you that doesn't work for sure. It's a waste of time.
It is. It's a growth mindset. If you have listened to my episodes before, I've probably said this in every single episode, especially with Preston on as a guest, because me and Preston both fall into this category of just having a growth mindset in everything in life. You want to wake up in the morning and have a better day than yesterday.
Sure.
Even if it's just the slightest thing. Maybe you eat a healthier breakfast than you did yesterday, or you did 2,000 more steps than you did yesterday. Something that makes you 1% better than yesterday. And if you just keep doing that, you will make way more progression over a 5, 10, 20-year span than if you try and change your entire life in one day. And that's my way with everything, with life, with business, with MMA, with bodybuilding, with all of these things. You can't become a black belt in 3 days. It's a 10, 12, 15-year progression. And that's because slower progression equals longer lasting results. And I think that not a lot of people have that mindset. People are so now. People are so want it now, give it to me, instead of working for it and slowly earning it. Because all this whole studio, this table, this desk, microphone, everything, you weren't given that.
No.
And how much nicer, how do you think it would affect you if you were just given this by your parents, your friends, if by unearned money? Like, what's the difference to you where if you didn't earn all this? Because you earned all this through blood, sweat, tears, hard work over the course of years and years and years. And how do you think you would look at it differently if it was just given to you?
That's a great question, and deeply philosophical too, because it gets into some territory that we're experiencing in real time as a society. And to preface this, in my life, I feel an immense amount of gratitude and fortune for having the life that I have had. So I've been given a lot of things, mainly just I've been blessed with my parents, my family, where I grew up, how I grew up, my complexion, this, that. Those are things that I didn't earn, but received, I guess, or were, given to me.
You were dealt a pretty good hand in regards to those things.
Yeah, and if I don't play that, I'm wasting it. And if I don't acknowledge that, I'm ignorant. So grateful for that, no doubt. But to your point about just receiving this instead of earning it, like, there were a few moments here at the studio while I was renovating it that were kind of surreal, because for the longest time, I'd arrived at the destination, which seemed so far away for so long that once you're there, it's almost this disbelief of like, oh yeah, they're here, they're set up, all this stuff is here. What's my excuse now? Like, I don't have one, and yeah, if the difference between, if this was all just turnkey was here, I didn't have to paint the walls and sand them and rip up the carpeting, pull every single nail. I pulled 5,000 nails out of this floor. It took forever. My forearms wouldn't work anymore. There wasn't an easier way to do it either. Like, it's just one by one, sitting on a skateboard, wheeling one at a time. And, that just makes this episode or everything created in here that much more meaningful, because it took so much. And rewinding back to just, delivering Amazon packages throughout the winter, all year, every weekend, like that alone too is like
on top of your full-time
job. It was like every single day. I didn't turn down a single side job. It was like anything I could do to make money that day was yes. The answer was yes. Oh, can you pressure wash my house? Yes. Oh, can you do a side job to paint this? Yep. Made it work. And it's amazing too, because there's periods in my life where I would put in just the average amount of effort, because 40-hour a week, that's a long time. It is. That's a lot, but you can double that output and still, not everyone. I'm saying this on behalf of a single, single dude. So, but there came a point too where it's just like, how much of my own BS am I going to believe? Like, if I make an excuse for why I can't do something, or like, oh, I'm too tired. It's like, well, guess what? The people that stormed the beaches at Normandy were really tired.
Yeah. And
they were scared, and they were 19 years old, and they were facing almost certain death. And then after you survived the initial, landing, you had to survive the rest of the war, a full year at least. And, comparing that to like the simplicity of some of the stuff we face today, where it's like looking at that with like reverence and being like, man, this is pretty good. If, delivering for DoorDash and Amazon is the worst I get it to make some money, I'm in a pretty good spot.
Something I definitely admire you for, I've always admired you for it, is definitely your work ethic. And not only your work ethic, but you've never said it directly to me, but I can just tell you're in the mindset of work now to set up what you want for later. And not enjoying now, because you still have to enjoy now, enjoy the process. But there's some people who just don't grasp the concept of like what you have now isn't going to be here forever. And I think you're in the opposite mindset almost, sort of like how I am. And for those who don't know, me and Ryan met through jiu-jitsu. We trained at the same spot. And from that, we always talked about this. The studio, he had this in mind. He's had it in mind before we met each other, like he said, but it really started coming to life, I feel like, in thought when we met and started talking and collaborating and making videos of me training and stuff like this. And you've always talked about working these jobs, working 3 jobs at one point, working every single day for this. And now it's a reality. And that doesn't mean it's over.
No.
Like, this is certainly not the final destination. It's just the start. Like, you put in all that work to start. It was like, it's the pregame.
Totally.
Put all this work in. Now you're at the starting point, and now it's time to go. Now it's time.
It's
to
a
hit
platform.
Yeah. What you're doing was building your foundation. You built your foundation. You have to build your foundation in life. And once that foundation is built, that's when you stop building wide and you start building up, in my opinion.
No, dude, that's like timeless wisdom right there. And I mean, 33, and it took me a lot longer than you to figure that out, you know? But absolutely right. I mean, we do live in an age where so many things are truly possible just because of the gadgetry that exists and the availability and accessibility of things. And
this device right here literally holds the key to everything.
Unbelievable. And I get people asking me all the time about like what camera they should get. It's like, your phone is like, honestly, I use my phone all the time for pro level stuff, or even if it's not pro, it's the intent behind it. It's like, what's the best camera? The one that you have. Yeah. It's like, and that applies to a lot of things. What's the best guitar? The one that has strings on it in the other room. Cause it's like the other ones don't. So it's like, make it out of, yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So it's been a surreal kind of progression. And interestingly, like, right as I received the keys for this place, I was in a car accident and had a pretty serious concussion. I didn't realize it at first because, you know, you walk away from the accident and it's like, oh, I made it, everything's fine. But really, it was coming out of that too, gave me a whole level of gratitude for cognition and mental function, because like it was temporarily disabled, where it was like I couldn't put one foot in front of the other. There were nights I would come here and have forgotten all the tools I needed back 15 miles away from here. And it's like, do I got to go all the way back to come all the way back to accomplish the thing I came here for? Yeah. So it's like, you know, those little things, little and maybe not so little things in life that, just recalibrate your levels of gratitude and understanding and appreciation. I mean, it's important to make note of them and kind of, you know, in my youth and in my maybe ignorance when I was younger, not to say that people that are younger are ignorant. You're certainly an example of that not being true, because you're like wise beyond your years, but not taking the lesson from something, because I believe you said something earlier about not making the same mistakes twice. Yeah. I made the same mistakes thousands of times, repeatedly, where it was like almost to the point where it's like, this is, are you serious? Like repeated. But that said, I mean, there's a definitive point where that ends or doesn't in some cases, but being aware of that and being, you know, the architect of your life rather than like, you know, being an active participant in it rather than a passenger. It's an important distinction to make in all facets of life. And one that's, I don't know, it takes maintenance. You have to work at it, but awareness is critically important for. It is, yeah.
Just being aware of not only your surroundings, but your internal self too. Mm-hmm. It's understanding your beliefs, your consciousness, your thoughts. That's what's important. Is every thought comes from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Every emotion you feel comes from an attachment, from an emotional attachment, physical attachment, spiritual attachment to something that happened previously. And that's something that you have to understand is like everything's connected to one another, and it all leads back to attachment to other things.
That's like one of the coolest things in Buddhism is nothing exists isolated. Everything, the one contains the many, many contains the one. It's all interconnected. And again, too, I used to be cynical of things like that, where it's like, give like a smart ass kind of like, well, this is isolated. This phone is over here. Like, no, on a real level, nothing exists in isolation of everything else. You're the sum total of everything good or bad that's happened to you, and everyone is, for better, for worse. But like, nothing exists in isolation. Everything is totally interconnected, and that's knowing that and like living that makes the world such a more beautiful place, really.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you're not just this person going through life trying to acquire money for no apparent reason. Yeah. You can have meaningful impact on people's lives, on the world around. I fed a freaking baby muskrat today.
I know, yeah.
And I'm like, that felt so good, dude, because it was like, the thing was like visibly like distressed. Mm-hmm. And I was like, he just needs some vitamins, bro. Like, so I found some clover and gave it to him. I'm like, why not? Why wouldn't I do that? I don't know. Like, that's a weird example, but it's just like, that poor little thing, hopefully it lives out its entire muskrat life in Lake Geneva and didn't die today because it was like famished.
And you saying too how you felt like good about it, that all leads back to the whole feeling of mutual benefit.
Yeah.
It's not, the muskrat didn't give you a $5 bill, but it gave you the feeling of accomplishment of, I did something today. And maybe it seems like nothing to somebody. Maybe somebody saw your Instagram story and was like, what is this idiot doing?
Even if they just laughed, you know?
But it provides you that sense of just like you did something, you know? And I think that's important. And just mutuality is so important in everything with life. It sort of leads like to the idea of karma too, because it's like what goes in always comes out. And I'm somebody who believes in karma.
Sure.
And I think just putting out good energy you will receive good energy back.
And I can say, having lived a very negative-minded life, like I said, very cynical, many years of my life where I was at a good heart, you know, always had, you know, compassion and so forth. But in terms of my own inner dialogue and self and so forth, there were periods of just really unfortunate inner dialogue, inner monologue, and just cynicism about, you know, interconnectivity of things and just denial of that. And so well, guess what? The disbelief in it gets you exactly that, like nothing. More cynicism, more negativity, and less opportunities. I mean, it's crazy. Just opening this place, I thought, oh man, I'm going to have to do all this advertising and it's going to be a real struggle to get all this work and all this stuff. Like, just opening, people I've never met before, I don't even know how they found me, have reached out to me and asked if I can do videos for them. And I'm like, I didn't even ask for that directly, but it happened as a result of just taking that next commitment level step and putting stuff out there too, because you never know who's seeing it either. Like,
I think people see hard work and they gravitate towards it for sure. If they see you're opening up and they see you posting stuff and they see you working hard, they want to be around that because they want that energy around them too.
Yeah.
Like I just said, good energy, you'll receive good energy. Put out bad energy, you're going to receive bad energy. And I think being around the right people is so important in life because you are who you hang around with. And I think that's one of the most true things is a quick telling way of a person, because obviously it's hard to judge somebody right away, but just look who they hang around with. We were just talking the other day about your friend who does like raps on cars, and we got into Ferraris, and you said somebody who has a Ferrari definitely knows somebody else who owns a Ferrari. And that's life. If you're hanging around successful businessmen, you're most likely with hard work, not just by being around them, but by working hard, taking their knowledge, taking their success, and having them help you, listening to them, you will become a successful businessman.
Sure.
Because it's who you surround yourself with. That's the ideologies that you give to yourself.
It's by osmosis. I mean, you can't help but pick up good or bad habits from the people that are around you. I mean, human nature is somewhat mimicry. Like as babies, you're just mimicking what's around you. I think that's like kind of built in, is that to survive, you have to mimic actions and behaviors in order to survive. That also has a detrimental component to it as well, because if you're surrounded by chaos and violence and just disarray, that's all you know. And that happens in utero too. I mean, like it begins before you're even physically in the world, like externally from the womb.
Some people are just dealt a shit hand with their
unfortunate.
Parents, with, it is unfortunate. There's babies that are born into parents that don't give a shit about them, and they want to give them away, and maybe they were an accident.
They resent. Yeah.
And they have drug addictions, alcohol addictions, and it's unfortunately the way that it has to go, because you can't really control that, but still it's an unfortunate thing.
That's why it's so important to like acknowledge the hand that you are dealt and do the most with it possible. And I've always loved the concept of altruism. Now it's got you pull up the definition of altruism on Wikipedia, it's like endless.
Yeah, paragraphs.
But I guess what I mean, practical altruism into a day-to-day life, is simple things and actions that, like, if I'm able to do something to help a friend, a stranger, whatever, and I actively don't do it, like I'm denying the potential of a positive thing to take place in the world. Like it could be small, like feeding the freaking muskrat, but just noticing those things and going like, why wouldn't I? Like this thing's distressed. It can't help itself. I am in a position to like help it along. Why? I need to.
And it doesn't cost you anything. It takes a minute out of your day to do it.
Not even. Like, and it just like that little animal knew there was some exchange of love there. Like there was something going on. Like it looked up to me, man. And I just like those little things matter. And I think altruism is something that this studio is an example of that too. I intend on making money here, but if people don't have the money to record a full-length podcast, I don't care. Come on in, sit down, talk to me. Let's do it. Because I was talking to a guy the other day at the bar. He's down and out. He's having trouble, and I invited him in here. I was like, man, you have a lot. You have a beautiful soul, I can tell, and a lot to say. You're very poetic with your words, and he's been through a lot. And just when I said, hey, would you come by and record an episode? He's like, you have no idea how much that would mean to me. Yeah. And I was like, if I can facilitate that need, you couldn't pay me enough money to get that feeling, If it was just money, I'd say I'd be missing out on huge payment that's non-monetary,
Yeah, I think the idea of money masks the feelings behind intention.
Sure.
It blinds people to the ideas of love and care, and sometimes money is obviously important because in the world we live in, you need money to buy food, you need money to buy a house, you need money to have an apartment, all these things. But you don't need money to give people love, to give people care, to show that you care, to build connections. Connections, friendships, relationships, they're free.
Totally.
They are all based off of the person and not the money that person has. Elon Musk or Bill Gates could be friends with a homeless man and have a great relationship, because it's like connection, like not connection in terms of who you know, but connection in terms of the spiritual and emotional feelings you get from somebody are priceless. There's no money that can deter that.
Certainly not. And money is a mechanism for change, whether good or bad. I mean, it enables a lot of things. It's a cool concept. I mean, deep down at my core, it's not a motivating factor for me, except for the acquisition of certain, like I needed this, so I had to do X amount of hourly tasks to do that. This mic, all this stuff, like, sure, that was a certain amount of sweat equity and output production, did tangible, meaningful things in exchange for money. But when it comes to art and some of the intangibles, love is invisible, kind of. It's a chemical thing, and compassion. These things, they're free to give and to receive. And yeah, talk about like things with the greatest benefit, more compassion, more love. I mean, again, sounds cliche in a world of yeah, because there's
what it's turned into, man.
Yeah, the rat race, the soul. You trade that away.
Definitely.
And
it's the now. It's the I want this now.
Instant gratification.
Yeah.
People
don't enjoy the journey anymore.
Yeah, the process. I mean, to get anywhere, you just have to walk. Mm-hmm. That's it. That was the only mode of transportation. I mean, until some guy rode a stegosaurus like a horse or a wildebeest. Whenever they first man, I'm tired. Sure. But there's something too to be said about that. Like, walking is kind of like a recalibration of that. Like if you go on a long walk, if you really challenge yourself, I mean, that's actually a component I'd like to do, because we were talking about doing the lake trail. I'd like to do somewhat guided lake trail walks and try to make it some sort of meditation as well, where it's like you're learning about the area around you, you're learning about yourself, you're learning about your limits, maybe some nutritional aspect to that too, where it's like, and also too, like no phones, turn the service off your phone, but you can take pictures, whatever, but we're not on Facebook out here. We're not on Instagram. This is, you're experiencing nature here.
Yeah.
And I feel like, a retreat from where we're at in modern life is like, I've been very fortunate in that, like, many of my experiences brought me way outside of society, like completely isolated from the internet, people, so many things. Like when I lived in Oregon, there were periods of time I didn't see the outside world for up to 3 months, like 90 days where it was very minimal connection with, didn't go to town, nothing. Just lived in the woods. Amazing experience. I didn't know it at the time, the net benefit that would have. But now looking back at it, like even a day away from your phone feels like a vacation. Cause it's like, it's always there to pull you out of
reality.
Yeah. And distract you from what you're ultimately doing. It's like, we haven't caught up to that. We haven't, yet, the maturity level hasn't caught up with where technology has advanced to. And Rogan talked about this a lot on his podcast, but basically like technology advances so quickly that the human being has not evolved the tools required to have self-control enough to be like, no, I'm going to put that away for now.
Yeah. I
takes
think
immense
effort
effort.
in society. Not to cut you off, but
no, fine.
I think we'll hit a point in society where it's like, okay, we've had enough of this. Like, okay, we've used this so much to a point where it's just like, okay, like we need just a stop. And I think it'll almost take a couple steps back and be like, we need our society back where it was less technology. We were talking about this yesterday where we were talking about flip phones. It's like, I want to get a flip phone for calls and all that stuff for a connection, and then just have an iPhone straight for business, just to run social medias about the podcasts and all this stuff. Because you need some of that. You can't completely cut it off when you're trying to do something like us, because you need that advertisement and connections with people. But another thing we talked about yesterday is we were driving to Walmart to get a late night ice cream run because we were grinding in here till 12. So in the car, I mentioned how what I'm focusing on is trying to limit giving in to quick happiness, like giving in to something that'll make you happy for a couple minutes, an hour, a few days, and then go away, and focus more on the long-term happiness with it, because you don't want to always give in to that quickness, because then it's like, then after it gives you a sense of guilt, and you don't want that sense of guilt. I think you want the progression, and I think iPhones, all this technology, I think it gives you that short-term
trip,
and it also gives you short-term good and short-term bad. If you open your Instagram and you see news that you don't like, or somebody you don't like make a post about something you don't like, now your day's ruined because of that. Like, your day is ruined because you opened your phone, you clicked that app, and you saw something. Nothing happened to you directly, but and it's the same thing with good. It's the same exact thing with good. And I think that quick gratification, that quick negative, whatever it is, I don't think it provides you any benefit.
No, and we're experiencing that in real time because, I mean, people have never been more fragmented. The attention span, relationships. I mean, for every good that technology's brought us, there's at least an equal or greater negative consequence. Nothing really exists without some negative consequence somewhere, even if it's just to create the raw materials to make the phone. Well, now there's huge demand for these precious metals, and there's all sorts of like, these are real world problems happening just to satisfy the demand. And think about the fact that these are basically disposable. This beautiful piece of technology that could be used time and time again just gets thrown away. I've got like 40 phones. I've gone through so many in my life, and I'm just like, man, it's like, there's precious metal. There's all sorts of stuff in there that I wish didn't have to just be thrown away.
Yeah.
That's a whole deeper, topic for another day. But the delayed gratification thing, though, one of my favorite sayings or concepts, I remember thinking about this about, say you see an orchard, apple orchard, almonds, orange grove, whatever. The people that planted those likely didn't get to eat the fruit. Yeah. Well, especially there's certain like grapes, olives, avocados, these types of things. Some very wise person was like, we need to plant these for the future generations who I'm never going to enjoy these fruits, but someone will.
Same thing with knowledge, with everything. Like you said yesterday about your painting job. You said, you'd make these people's houses beautiful, and then you'd never hear from them again.
Yeah.
You'd never be in the house again. You'd never see it again. And what do you get from that? You really don't.
Yeah.
Maybe you get that instant like, wow, look, I did this, but then that's it. It's cut off.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, it just, there's a satisfaction in doing it for sure. 'Cause you're like, I can do this. And I guess now I can paint professionally, at least to a degree, and do that for myself. But it's almost sad because you're like kind of friends with these people for a week, 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. You do this great work, and then you never see it again or them. And it's almost sad. It's like this beautiful girl you connected with, and then bye, I gotta leave. Yeah. Like, well, what was that? Like, it leaves you like in this weird state of, oh, well, okay, I guess I'll go to the next one.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to bring up, is how what we're starting to do with these podcasts, with YouTube videos, with building the connections with people that we are, these long-term relationships, not only business relationships, but friendships. It lives on forever. Mm-hmm. In 45 years, we could watch this episode of this podcast, and it's like that gratification, that happiness is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Because I want something that is long-term and gives me a feeling of accomplishment that lasts, not something where it was done out of giving in to the feeling of needing pleasure as opposed to wanting to set yourself up for long-term happiness.
There's a great saying. I heard it first from my dad. I know he didn't coin it necessarily, but it's success is the progressive realization of predetermined worthy ideas. It's a lot to like unpack, but really progressive movements, progressive actions, measurable things. This is the first episode you and I have ever done, one of many. And we can look back at this. The next one's going to get better. The next one's going to get better until, I look at Rogan. I remember starting watching him early on, accidentally. I don't even know why. I was looking up somebody else, and then I saw Rogan, and I think back to that crude, rudimentary, weird graphics. He was kind of
DMT.
He was like kind of unrefined.
Yeah, pre-DMT.
Yeah, and like seeing the evolution of that man and what his show has done to the world. Talk about, this to me, podcasting is the like final frontier until we get into like telekinesis or something. But
connection.
These long form conversations, these are like fireside chats. This is how we evolved, sitting around campfires, talking about the stars.
My favorite thing from a Rogan podcast ever. I think about this all the time and apply it to the idea of podcasting. I forgot who his guest was, but the guest was like, or it was Rogan who said it, I don't remember, but on a Rogan episode, somebody said back when the presidential debate was going on between Trump and Biden, they were like, if Rogan did a podcast with each of them, you will learn so much more about them from that podcast than you would putting out these bullshit advertisements on YouTube and Instagram and TV and don't vote this guy, he lied about XYZ and all this stuff. And I think where if you just have a legitimate conversation, it doesn't even have to be about politics for them in the sense where it's, if you just hear their ideologies that they have with life and with everything, business, connections, things we talk about, and just hear their general background of life, I think that'll provide you so much more insight than trying to outdo your opponent.
In those 6-minute blips in between commercials, it's like, come on, what do you really care about? People getting real information that's usable or selling ad space on TV? It's like, this is running the world we're talking about. Yeah. Is it really going to be interrupted by a Doritos commercial? Like, it just seems so ridiculous. Like, it's absurd. But no doubt. I think this format brings the truth and reality out of people, because there's many people that can't hack it for more than a few minutes. Their facade starts to crumble, and those politicians especially. You start asking them real questions, and they go, "Where's the
teleprompter?
Where's my handler? This isn't on the script." It's like, yeah, bro, this is real life. Like, and I think this is the last bastion of, I think, freedom of thought and speech and expression, because think about, say, in like pre-war Germany and so on and so forth, like, you had to go underground to have certain ideas and speak about them and exchange letters in the secret at night to try and form some form of resistance. Or like, did you hear they're coming door to door and doing these things? Like, you didn't have the distribution networks that we do now, where it's like anyone in the world can hear this podcast that we recorded with not necessarily rudimentary, but like, this can be uploaded to the world and experienced by anyone with an internet connection in the world within the next half hour.
Yeah. But then the problem with that too is that there is a form of censorship where, like, I don't even want to say the word, but if you have been paying attention recently, a lot of people have been talking about YouTube and how they've been censoring a lot when people have been talking about the C word, meaning the virus that obviously created a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about things, they don't want any sort of knowledge getting out that they don't give to you. So they've been shadow banning people and things like that. So like I said, I don't want to get into it too much, but I just want to say how the fact that our speech can be censored is just absolutely ridiculous.
100%.
Especially, I don't think it should be censored in any form, regardless of what you're saying. But especially if we're not even talking bad upon them. And I talk plenty of shit upon them. But
sure.
I mean, I'm not one to believe anything that they tell me. But still, like, there is no reason why we shouldn't be able to sit down here, have this conversation about anything, and be able to post it and anybody be able to listen to it.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think the freedom of speech is fundamentally, it's why it's number one.
Yeah.
And honestly, too, I think we forget in the United States because, passing the Constitution test is just this strange, like, well, I passed it and moved on. It's like, no, this is a rubric for existence. Like, they did a pretty good job. Say what you will about, like, it's a brilliantly thought out document that doesn't get the respect it really deserves. I mean, and I've took it for granted a lot too, but when you think about the freedom of speech, what a profound thing that is. Like, how many places don't actually have that? China doesn't have that the way we do.
You can't even have as many kids as you want.
Right. And so these are important fundamental ideas that, like, have to be protected, and, like, it's a slippery slope. So part of why I made this place was to have people in here that I disagree with. I don't need to agree with you. Yeah. Discourse is important. I mean,
we've disagreed on things, and
no doubt, and
growth comes from that.
And how can I believe my own beliefs if they aren't challenged in real time in front of me?
Yeah.
And like someone saying, I don't think you really believe that.
Yeah.
Is that something your parents told you that you're just parroting out? Is that something you think sounds cool? Like,
well, it all comes down to conditioning.
Yeah.
I believe I attribute my thoughts on this to the Timbo Sugar Show with Sean O'Malley and Tim Welch, because
shout out them,
because they taught me the idea of conditioning. Same thing with Anthony DeMello. He talks about it in his awareness book, which, yet again, buy the book. It'll change your life in every single way imaginable. It's the idea of when you're born and you're a newborn baby, you are 1,000% moldable as a person because you don't know anything. Nothing. You don't know left from right, right? So
yeah, those aren't even concepts.
Yeah. So you completely rely on your parents, siblings, the close people around you, their ideologies.
Yeah.
And that is yet again goes back to being dealt a shit card, because if you grow up being told that if you drink a Coke every day, you'll be fine. Or if you eat shit food, if you eat McDonald's once a day, who cares? It's fine. Then you're going to grow up thinking that. And if somebody challenges that, you're going to be like, dude, like whatever. Like it blows my mind that conditioning isn't talked about. And it isn't talked about that your ideas aren't even your own.
No.
Your thoughts, they're not yours. No. They're what you've been taught.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. There's no sense of individuality.
And back to the Buddhism concept of like nothing existing in isolation. Say someone's like, oh, you're a great photographer. It's like, I'm great at using amazing tools that were invented by geniuses over the course of a long time.
Yeah.
I happen to manipulate a few buttons. I couldn't build a camera.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a departure from what you were talking about. But still, the unlearning for me personally was probably one of the most important things I ever did, was unlearn a lot of programming from society, from different institutions that don't serve you ultimately, that they want control of your destiny.
For sure. And you have to go through that process. If you don't go through the process of unlearning and taking a step back and challenging your own ideas, the best thing you could do is challenge your own ideas.
Yeah.
Get your ideas challenged. Yeah. Because that's why I have a whole podcast episode with Preston about this, about yes men, about surrounding yourself with people who just tell you yes. They just say like, they agree with you just because they don't want to feel like that guy. And that goes with life in a sense, where if you're just being told yes all the time and you're never challenged, where's the growth? There is no growth at all. So I think being able to challenge your ideas, your beliefs, your concepts, all of that is the only way to grow in that aspect.
Absolutely. And on the topic of like learning, some people don't even have the framework to challenge their own beliefs, which is a gift in a way, because I think you have to seek it out. Some people are innately given, maybe they're born with a certain level of cynicism about the world. I personally was like, I've kind of been a skeptic from the time I was a little kid. I was always like, do I believe that? I was kind of always skeptical of authority and like school. I was like, this seems, you mean you guys know everything? I don't. Yeah. I kind of was like, not. Maybe I was a little hellion, but it's paid off in a way, because if you're just parroting information, you don't actually believe it. And also too, if you can't defend your opposition's talking points and like make a case for their argument, you don't have a strong argument yourself.
Yeah.
You need to be able to, if your belief on something can't stand up to the scrutiny of a 2-hour podcast, I don't think you really have that belief.
And how do you know it's even your belief if you haven't seen other beliefs?
Sure.
If you haven't looked into other beliefs and looked into other options, how do you know it's really yours?
It's not.
There could be another option that you think is way better and you just don't know it yet.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I'm somewhat agnostic on a lot of things for that reason, because it's like, I think there's so much benefit to, there's so many amazing teachings to draw from, in the context of religion. Like, there's so many interesting, timeless wisdom things that for me to not acknowledge Buddhism and things,
I'm a huge
Sufism and all these mystical things, like these are like universal truths. It doesn't matter which book they came from, they apply. And it's like to deny that entirely you're missing out on important lessons that might not come from the book you chose. That's like having one book in a library. What?
Yeah.
I
love reading stuff from many years ago. I mean, there's stuff like with Anthony DeMello that was written like 30, 40 years ago. And then there's stuff I read from like Miyamoto Musashi, like his stuff. Or,
unbelievable. Meditations, Julius Caesar, or not Caesar, Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It seems like it was written like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
His level of insight.
When you look into Stoicism, right, people are starting to become aware of it now in today's society. I think there's Stoicism in general is sort of on the uprise. I think there's a lot of books and stuff, and people are starting to finally get into it.
Sorry to cut you off. Is that still on? Is it a little like this is screen on?
Doesn't look like it now.
Fuck. All right. It looks on-ish. Sorry to interrupt. I can cut that out.
But like things that were written thousands and thousands of years ago still apply to today, and not only still apply to today, but are the most important things today, because you have to, like, obviously things evolutionize, like we said. So you have to sort of, look at what worked and what hasn't worked, right? But going back to the roots of things, I think that's the answer to many problems.
Yeah. And kind of to that point, that wisdom came out of, it's applicable today in a special way because it's not convoluted or crowded by like the beliefs of today. Like those truths are pure, like in their purest form.
Yeah.
So,
They're not clouded by social media,
right,
or by other people.
Or even like scientific dogma. Because I mean, I like science too, but at the end of the day,
not everything.
Yeah, it can be very dogmatic and not, for a long time, many things have been dismissed as just woo-woo nonsense. Oh, there's nothing to that, blah, blah, blah. Well, lo and behold, scientific method does determine that some of these woo-woo things are very real. And, go figure. There's so much, we know so much, there's so much we don't know, that to assume that we got it all figured out is just lunacy.
Not even that. There's also so much knowledge that has been figured out that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
I think that's a big topic too, that people don't even realize that there's hundreds and millions of things out there that we haven't discovered, that we don't know, that we haven't even unlocked the consciousness to be able to understand it yet.
Yeah.
Like,
we haven't reached that bandwidth. Like it's not knowable. And also too, that like, I've always thought that was funny when human beings talk about intelligence or like view animals in the zoo, which is a crazy concept, but like look at it, it's doing things. It's like, yeah, what makes you think it's not intelligent enough to, like, it's always been like, oh wow, it's figured out a way to, like, yeah, they're not idiots.
no, they habitat the earth way before we did.
And trees too. It's like, okay, they've been on, the Douglas fir tree's been around for 300 million years, right? It's been evolving for that long. It's seen some shit.
Yeah.
And like, to think that it hasn't developed incredible networks at some level of intelligence, whether it's not the ability to create, this piece of electronic equipment, but why would it? It doesn't have a use for that. It speaks through literally almost telekinesis through a mycelial network that communicates throughout the forest floor. Like, it had the OG internet built in, mycelial networks, its roots, its microbes, all that stuff interconnects to make this like brilliant genius thing
that we aren't even close to being able.
We can't measure. You can't. How do we? We're too infantile to even acknowledge that that's. I mean, a lot of people do. Like a botanist would be like, it's brilliant, but like the average person is just going to look at that and be like, it's a tree, cut it down, whatever.
It's a completely different thing that we can't understand. Our brains can't.
You can't
process that.
No, just like if you put a tree in here, it's not going to be like, yeah, let me jump in on that podcast.
Yeah.
It'd be dope, but
people have Groot in here.
Oh yeah. I really need some cacti. I'll tell you what, I need some plants in this place. It's a little bit devoid of nature.
Drop a comment. Let us know what we need in here.
Verdant Soul, actually, my friends, they run a plant shop, so I'm gonna I've been needing their plant consultation.
Sure, yeah. Let us know how we could change this up a bit, make it better for the viewers, make it better for the listeners. Let us know. This is, like I said, this is our first episode in here. One of, an unbelievable amount that we can.
I'm down to do this every day, bro. Yeah, seriously. I want to get in that. It's like a sparring session, because we covered some topics. These are, you brought up some stuff that just sparked in me thoughts I haven't had in a long time, or the freedom to speak about it and have someone hit that ball back. It's like,
we haven't checked our phones, and however long this episode is, like, we haven't even looked at the computer to edit or do anything.
Thought of it.
Just we sat here and we get to talk to each other, and it's something I'm grateful for. Some people don't have the time to take out of their day to do this, and I'm very fortunate too, because it opens up my mind. I hope listeners, if you listen all the way to this point so far, that you're able to just understand that, like, everybody should be able to do this. Have a sit down conversation, talk your mind, get your views out, get your points challenged, and I think it'll benefit you so much in the long run.
Don't be afraid. Share, speak your mind, and do so in a respectful manner, obviously, because there's too much shouting and noise now. But like this type of discourse, conversation through a screen, through a text character limit, ridiculous. We need more engage real conversations, eye contact, you know,
Yeah. Feeling. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
I feel your beliefs.
Yeah. And
it's an energy.
And now too, you get to listen to this back and evolve on these thoughts and be like, I didn't say that that didn't come out the way I want to. Next time I can implement, you know, a different way of. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that was our first episode in the new studio, episode 8 total of the Mind Talks. And we're going to be releasing these. We'll figure out a schedule, but we're going to be grinding these out, grinding YouTube videos out. We're working in the studio every day, hours on end. So thank you guys for listening. If you made it all the way to the end, drop a comment. Let us know if there's anything we can do to fix it, to make it sound better, make it look better, change up the appearance, anything you want. And thank you again for listening. This is Mind Talks episode 8 with Ryan James.